I stomped on Bibles in front of thousands of people online, thinking I was a hero defending Islam, until something happened that made me fall to my knees in tears. Have you ever been so sure you were right that you couldn't see the hatred growing in your own heart? My name is Ibrahim and I am 28 years old. The hot California sun beat down on Courthouse Park in downtown Fresno as I placed 5 black Bibles on the folding table. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking with what I believed was holy anger. It was June 15th, 2023, and I was about to do something that would make me famous in all the wrong ways. I grew up in a small apartment near Highway 99 where the sound of trucks never stopped, not even at night. My father Jamal drove Uber during the day and stocked shelves at Walmart at night. He would come home smelling like cleaning chemicals and sweat. My mother Layla cleaned rich people's houses in North Fresno. She scrubbed their toilets and mopped their floors and came home so tired she could barely stand. But she never missed prayer time. Not once. Not ever. From the time I could walk, my parents told me the world was against us. They showed me videos of mosques with broken windows. They showed me news stories about Muslims getting hurt just for wearing their religious clothes. They told me about Palestine, about families losing their homes, about children crying in the rubble. I learned early that life was about fighting back. It was about standing up to the people who wanted to crush us. I was the kid who raised his hand in class when the teacher said something wrong about Islam. I corrected her in front of everyone. I didn't care if the other kids laughed. When I was in high school, I organized a walkout to protest the Iraq War. 70 students walked out with me. We held signs, we chanted. The principal suspended me for 3 days, but I didn't care. I felt like a hero. At Fresno State University, I became president of the Muslim Student Association. I had 50,000 followers on Instagram and Twitter. People from all over California knew my name. They shared my posts about Palestinian rights and Western lies. They called me brave. They called me a voice for people who had no voice. I believed them. I built my whole life around being that voice. Everything changed in May 2023 when I saw the video. A group of Christians in Orange County had burned a Quran in public. They recorded themselves doing it. They were laughing and chanting about religious freedom while our holy book turned to ash. I watched that video 20 times. Each time I felt the anger grow hotter in my chest like I had swallowed fire. I called an emergency meeting at my apartment on June 10th. 30 Muslim student leaders came from schools all across California. We sat on the floor of my small living room. Some sat on the couch. Others stood against the walls. Everyone was angry. Everyone wanted to do something. I stood up and told them my idea. We would stomp on Bibles in public. We would film it and post it online. We would make Christians feel exactly what we felt when they burned our Quran. We would show them their double standards. They could burn our book and call it free speech, but we would make them watch us stomp on theirs. A girl named Aisha spoke up. She was from UC Berkeley and she wore a light blue hijab. She said this might be wrong. She said the Quran teaches us to respect other religions. She said Christians and Jews are people of the book and we should treat them with dignity. Her voice was soft but clear. I felt my face get hot. I told her she was being weak. I told her we were in a war and we couldn't afford to be soft. I talked about Malcolm X and how he said we should defend ourselves. I talked about Palestine and how people there fought back against those who hurt them. I said stomping on Bibles wasn't about hating Christians. It was about making a political point that would finally get people to pay attention. One by one, the others agreed with me. Even Aisha finally nodded her head, though she looked uncomfortable. We planned everything for June 15th. We would meet at Courthouse Park at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We would buy 5 Bibles from a Christian bookstore. We would set up cameras. We would live stream everything on social media. We wanted the whole world to watch. The night before the demonstration, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to cars drive past on the street below. I felt excited. I felt powerful. I felt like I was finally doing something that mattered. I got up at midnight and prayed. I asked Allah to protect us and guide our actions. I asked Him to help us defend Islam. I truly believed I was doing righteous work. I went to the Christian bookstore on June 14th. The woman behind the counter smiled at me. She had gray hair and kind eyes. She asked if I was looking for anything special. I told her I needed 5 Bibles, different versions. She seemed so happy to help me. She showed me the NIV and the KJV and the ESV. She told me about each one like they were precious treasures. She had no idea what I was planning to do with them. I paid cash, $140 for 5 Bibles. I carried them out to my car in a plastic bag. They felt heavier than they should have. I put them in my trunk and drove home. That night, I stacked them on my desk. I looked at them for a long time. The leather covers were smooth and new. Some had gold writing on the front. I pushed away the small, uncomfortable feeling in my stomach. I told myself this was necessary. This was justice. June 15th arrived hot and bright. By 2 in the afternoon, 25 activists had gathered at Courthouse Park. We wore keffiyehs around our necks. We carried signs that said, "Respect all religions and stop Christian Islamophobia." We set up the table with the 5 Bibles arranged in a row. Several people had cameras. We were ready to start the live stream. I stood in front of the camera and held up the first Bible. I explained why we were there. I talked about the Quran burning in Orange County. I talked about Christian crusades hundreds of years ago. I talked about how America protected people who burned our book but called us as terrorists when we protested. My voice was loud and strong. I felt certain I was right. Then I put the Bible on the ground. The concrete was rough and gray under my feet. I lifted my foot and brought it down hard on the leather cover. The sound echoed in my ears. I stomped again and again. I felt something like victory rising in my chest. This was resistance. This was fighting back. This was showing them we wouldn't accept their lies anymore. 4 other activists took turns. Each one explained their reasons while standing over a Bible on the ground. Each stomp got cheers from our group. The live stream viewer count climbed, first hundreds, then thousands. The comments section exploded with reactions. Some Muslims praised us. Some cursed us. Many Christians wrote about how hurt they felt. But I didn't care about their feelings. I thought they deserved to hurt the way they had hurt us. That's when I saw the old man. He stood at the edge of our gathering wearing jeans and a blue shirt. He was maybe 70 years old with white hair and wrinkled skin. He held a worn Bible against his chest like it was a baby. His face showed no anger. He just looked sad, so deeply sad. His eyes had tears in them. Something about him made my stomach feel strange. I tried to ignore him, but I couldn't stop looking at him. He wasn't yelling at us like I expected. He wasn't threatening us. He was just standing there crying while holding his Bible. His tears bothered me more than any angry words could have. Have you ever done something you thought was brave, but felt a sick feeling in your stomach telling you maybe, just maybe, you were wrong? The demonstration continued for another 15 minutes. We stomped on all 5 Bibles. We gave speeches about justice and respect. We chanted Allahu Akbar at the end, our voices echoing across the park. Our live stream reached over 10,000 viewers. By every measure, we had succeeded. We had gotten attention. We had made people uncomfortable. We had made our point. But I couldn't stop watching the old man. He stood there, The entire time, tears running down his withered face, clutching his Bible. After we finished, he walked toward me. My body tensed. I expected him to yell. I expected him to curse us. I expected him to prove everything I believed about Christians being hateful hypocrites. Instead, he stopped 3 feet away from me and spoke softly. I am praying for you, son. Not because I'm angry, but because I can see you're hurting and I want you to know the Jesus who loves you. I laughed right in his face. The sound came out harsh and mean. I told him to save his prayers. I told him we didn't need pity from Christians who thought they had all the answers. Told him his religion had caused more pain in the world than any other. I told him his God was made up. I told him his Bible was just paper with no special power. I said these things loud so the live stream would catch every word. He just looked at me with those sad, gentle eyes. Jesus died for you too, Ibrahim. He knows your name. He knows your pain. And he's waiting for you to come home. Then he turned and walked away, moving slowly like his body hurt. I stood there with a Bible under my foot, feeling strange and empty inside. His words kept repeating in my mind. Jesus died for you too, Ibrahim. Why would anyone die for me? What kind of God would love someone who was literally stepping on his holy book? Nothing about it made sense. We went to a hookah lounge that night to celebrate. 20 of us crowded into the small space filled with sweet smoke and Arabic music. We replayed our video on our phones. We read comments out loud. We felt like we had won something important. But I sat quietly in the corner, barely participating. My friends noticed and asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was just tired. When I got home around midnight, I tried to pray. I laid out my prayer mat facing Mecca like I had done thousands of times. But when I knelt down and started the Arabic words, they felt wrong in my mouth. They felt empty. They felt like they were hitting the ceiling and bouncing back. For the first time in my entire life, praying felt like talking to nothing. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed watching the red numbers on my alarm clock change. 1 walk, 2 ngok, 3 walk. My mind kept showing me the old man's face, his tears, his gentle voice. Jesus died for you too, Ibrahim. Around 3:30 in the morning, I did something I had never done before. I opened my laptop and typed into Google, "Why do Christians love their enemies?" I had spent years studying Christianity so I could argue against it. I knew about the Crusades and colonialism and forced conversions. I knew all the bad things Christians had done throughout history. But I had never actually studied what Christians believed about love. I had never read what Jesus taught about forgiveness. I had never investigated grace. The search results showed me passages from something called the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus said to love your enemies. He said to pray for people who hurt you. He said to bless those who curse you. I read about Jesus forgiving the soldiers who were killing him. He asked God to forgive them because they didn't know what they were doing. I read about Christians who forgave people who murdered their families. I read about love that made no logical sense. This was completely different from everything I understood about religion. Religion was supposed to be about us versus them, good people versus bad people, faithful versus unfaithful. But Jesus was teaching something else entirely. He was teaching about a God who loved his enemies, a God who died for people who hated him, a God who offered forgiveness for free to anyone who would take it. I kept reading until the sun came up. I read all 4 Gospels that night, moving from Matthew to Mark to Luke to John. I read about Jesus healing sick people and eating with outcasts and touching lepers that everyone else avoided. I read about him forgiving a woman caught in adultery when everyone else wanted to kill her. I read about him dying on a cross and then coming back to life 3 days later. The more I read, the more I realized Jesus wasn't just claiming to be a prophet. He was claiming to be God himself in human form. He forgave sins which only God could do. He said he was the way, the truth, and the life. He said no one could get to the Father except through him. He let people worship him. He said anyone who had seen him had seen God. These were either the words of a crazy person, a liar, or God himself. I tried to match what I was reading with what Islam taught about Jesus. Islam said Jesus was a prophet. Islam said he was born of a virgin and did miracles. But Islam said he wasn't God. Islam said he didn't die on the cross. Islam said someone else died in his place and Jesus went straight to heaven. The two stories couldn't both be true. One had to be wrong. The next few days were torture. I went to classes but couldn't focus. I went to work but made mistakes. I tried to act normal around my friends but felt like I was living in a fog. Everything that used to make sense now felt shaky and uncertain. The foundation of my entire life was starting to crack. On June 20th, I got a call from the university. They were investigating our Bible stomping demonstration. Even though we hadn't broken any laws, they were asking if student organizations could be held responsible for actions that violated university values. I might lose my position as MSA president. I might face other discipline. My parents called that same day. Someone had shown them the video. My father's voice on the phone was cold and disappointed. He asked me what I thought I was doing. He said I had embarrassed our family. He said I had made Muslims look bad. My mother cried in the background. I tried to explain about the Quran burning, about standing up for our faith, but he didn't want to hear it. The backlash from the Muslim community was intense. The Fresno Islamic Center issued a statement condemning our demonstration. Imam Hassan, who had known me since I was a child, called my father to express his disappointment in me. I got dozens of messages from Muslim friends telling me I had gone too far. I had crossed a line. I had given fuel to people who already hated us. But the harshest criticism came from Aisha, the girl from UC Berkeley, who had questioned our plan from the beginning. She posted a long thread on Twitter explaining why our demonstration violated Islamic principles. She quoted Quran verses about respecting other religions. She quoted hadith about how Prophet Muhammad treated Christians and Jews with honor. She called our actions hate pretending to be activism. She said we had damaged relationships that took years to build. Her words cut deep because she was right. I knew in my heart we hadn't been motivated by justice. We had been motivated by anger and revenge and the desire to hurt others the way we felt hurt. I had convinced myself it was righteous, but it was really just hatred dressed up in activist language. I started reading the Bible every night. After my roommate fell asleep, I would sit at my desk with a small lamp, turning pages as quietly as possible. I was terrified someone would see me and ask questions I couldn't answer. I was terrified of what it might mean if the Bible was actually true. I was terrified of losing everything I had built my life around. On June 27th, 12 days after the demonstration, I was reading the Gospel of John. I reached chapter 15, where Jesus says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you." Those words hit me like I had been punched in the chest. I suddenly understood that all my activist work, all my fighting, all my attempts to be on the right side of history were really just me trying to create my own meaning. I was trying to earn my own righteousness. I was trying to save myself. Have you ever realized that everything you built your identity around was really just you running from the truth you didn't want to face? I fell to my knees beside my bed. I wasn't facing Mecca. I wasn't following any ritual. I was just crying out to whoever was real. God, if you're there, I need to know the truth. Not the truth I want, just actual truth, no matter what it costs me. What happened next, I cannot explain logically. I didn't hear an audible voice or see a bright light. But I heard something deeper than sound, felt something stronger than physical sensation. A voice from inside and outside at the same time said clearly, "Ibrahim, I died for you. I took the punishment you deserved. Your sins are forgiven. Come home. I collapsed forward, sobbing from relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. The weight I had carried for years, the guilt from stomping on Bibles, the exhaustion from trying to earn God's approval, all lifted in an instant. I felt clean. I felt new. I felt forgiven. I surrendered everything to Jesus Christ. I knew this would destroy my reputation and devastate my parents. I knew it might end friendships and possibly put me in danger, but I also knew it was true and I couldn't unknow what I now knew. On June 29th, I went back to Courthouse Park with a handwritten sign. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I stood in the exact spot where I had stomped on Bibles 2 weeks earlier, holding my sign and my own Bible for 6 hours. Some people ignored me, some shouted insults. A few Muslims called me a traitor, but several Christians came to ask about my sign. When I explained I had converted, some of them cried. They prayed with me right there, thanking God for my salvation. Robert, the old man whose tears had bothered me during the demonstration, saw a photo of me on social media and came to the park. When he saw me with my apology sign, he hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Tears ran down his face. He told me he had been praying for me every single day since our encounter. Robert took me to meet Pastor Michael at Grace Community Church. On July 15th, exactly 1 month after the demonstration, I was baptized in a small private ceremony. I drove to my parents' apartment on July 22nd, my hands shaking. My mother was cooking kibbeh. My father watched Al Jazeera. Everything looked normal. I was about to destroy that normalcy forever. I told them everything. My mother collapsed into my father's arms, wailing like someone had died. My father stood up, looked at me with pure contempt and said, "You are no longer my son. Leave this house and never return." I tried to explain I still love them, that becoming Christian didn't mean I hate Muslims, but they couldn't hear me over their shock. My father physically pushed me toward the door. I left my childhood home knowing I might never be welcomed back. Within 48 hours, I received over 200 messages. Some tried to convince me to return to Islam. Others sent death threats. Several close friends wrote posts about how I had betrayed the Palestinian cause, Islam, and my family. I was expelled from the Muslim Student Association and banned from community spaces I had been part of my whole life. The interfaith director at Fresno State recommended I transfer to another school, change my name, essentially disappear. But I refused. I felt God had given me a testimony that needed to be shared, not hidden. I started a YouTube channel called From Activism to Christ, documenting my journey and answering questions about why I left Islam. It gave me a platform to reach other Muslims questioning their faith. My parents had been helping pay for college. They immediately cut off all support. I had to get 3 part-time jobs, driving Uber in the mornings, tutoring in the afternoons, working at Starbucks at night. Muslim-owned businesses where I had worked fired me. I lost the entire support network I had relied on my whole life. I struggled with doubts. What if I was wrong? What if I had destroyed my family for nothing? I missed my parents so much, it physically hurt. But every time doubt came, I would remember that moment when Jesus revealed himself to me, the peace that filled me when I surrendered to him. The Christian community at Grace Community Church became my new family. They helped pay my rent when I came up short. They invited me to dinners when I was lonely. They prayed with me when I struggled. Robert especially became like a father to me, meeting with me every week to study the Bible. Have you ever lost everything that mattered to you, only to discover you gained something worth infinitely more? I graduated from Fresno State in May 2024 with my political science degree. But my path had completely changed. I felt called to reach other Muslims with the gospel. I enrolled in online seminary courses while working full-time and volunteering with a ministry serving Middle Eastern immigrants. The most painful struggle was being cut off from my family. My mother returned my cards unopened. My father never answered my calls. My younger sister Noor blocked me on social media, telling friends she no longer had a brother. The rejection felt like mourning people still alive but completely unreachable. I cried out to God, asking why following Jesus had to cost so much. In November 2024, I received a YouTube message from Hassan, a Muslim student at UC Berkeley, struggling with doubts about Islam. We met at a coffee shop and talked for over 4 hours. By the end, Hassan prayed to receive Christ, tears streaming down his face. That meeting started an informal ministry. Through my YouTube channel, I connected with Muslims all over California, secretly exploring Christianity. Over the next year, I personally led 23 Muslims to Christ. Each conversion reminded me of God's incredible grace. These were people who risked everything to follow Jesus. The most unexpected development came in August 2025. After more than 2 years of silence, my mother sent a letter. She had been following my YouTube channel anonymously. She didn't understand my decision but wanted me to know she still loved me. We began exchanging letters, carefully avoiding religious debate. In December 2025, she agreed to meet for coffee. When I saw her walk into Starbucks, I almost broke down. We talked for 2 hours about safe topics. At the end, she hugged me and said, "You're still my son, Ibrahim. I don't agree with your choices, but you're still my son." Those words were the most beautiful gift. My father still refused all contact. Noor recently unblocked me, saying she missed me but couldn't openly have a relationship while living with our parents. These partial restorations were bittersweet. In September 2025, I returned to Courthouse Park, to the exact spot where I had stomped on Bibles. I organized a public event called From Hate to Hope, a testimony of transformation. Over 200 people came, Christians, Muslims, and local news crews. I publicly testified about how Jesus had transformed my heart and apologized to the Christian community. Then I announced I was launching Bridge Builders, a nonprofit fostering genuine understanding between Muslim and Christian communities through honest dialogue. Robert agreed to serve as co-director. Several local churches and one moderate mosque signed on as partners. The event attracted national media attention. Christianity Today and the Gospel Coalition featured my story. I received hundreds of messages from people saying my testimony challenged their assumptions. The most powerful moment came when a young Muslim man approached me. Anger flashed in his eyes. "You betrayed Islam. You betrayed your family." Then his face crumpled and he started crying. "But I have the same questions you had," he whispered. "I've been reading the Bible secretly for months. I don't know what to believe anymore. Can you help me?" His name was Zain. 3 weeks later, after extensive conversations and study, he surrendered his life to Christ. Have you ever watched God take your worst mistake and transform it into something that brings others to Him? It's now January 2026, 2.5 years since I stomped on Bibles in Courthouse Park. The transformation has been complete. Zain is now connected with a church, navigating the same difficult journey I walked. I'm completing my seminary degree while working full-time with Bridge Builders. I'm engaged to Sarah, a former missionary to the Middle East who understands the Muslim world and has embraced my complex background with grace. We're planning a June 2026 wedding, exactly 3 years after the incident Ye thought would define me forever. My YouTube channel has over 100,000 subscribers. I regularly receive messages from Muslims questioning Islam and curious about Jesus. One man in Pakistan was beaten by his family for converting. Another woman in Iran fled the country, yet they choose Jesus anyway. Through Bridge Builders, we've facilitated over 50 dialogue events between Muslim and Christian communities, creating space for honest questions without judgment. The work isn't easy. Some Muslims call me a traitor. Some Christians say I'm too soft on Islam. But I believe Jesus calls us to speak truth with love, sharing the gospel with gentleness and respect. Robert is now 73, his health declining, but his faith stronger than ever. He says, watching God answer his prayers and transform my life has strengthened his own faith. Pastor Michael baptized 3 former Muslims last month, all found Christ through my testimony. My mother and I meet monthly for coffee. We still can't discuss religion without tension, but we've learned to love each other despite our differences. She told me she's proud of the man I've become, even if she disagrees with my faith. My father remains closed off. I've accepted that reconciliation may never happen. Last month, I returned to Courthouse Park with a box of Bibles to distribute. I stood where I had stomped on God's word, now freely giving it away. A homeless man approached and asked what I was doing. I read him John 1:1. Tears filled his eyes. He asked if God could love someone like him. I told him about a Muslim activist who stomped on Bibles and found forgiveness. The same Jesus who appeared to me in my apartment is knocking on your heart right now. Not because you're good enough or religious enough, but because he loves you. All you have to do is pray, Jesus, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. I surrender my life to you. Forgive my sins and make me new. I still pray 5 times a day. But now to the God who loves me unconditionally. I still read sacred texts daily, but now the Bible instead of the Quran. I still live my faith publicly, but now I share good news rather than defend religious superiority. If God can transform someone who literally stomped on his sacred word, he can transform you regardless of your past. Jesus is calling you right now. Will you let him in? What will you do with Jesus?